Today's topic is going to be about narcissists and toxic people and how they don't really want healthy relationships. Before I get into today's topic, please subscribe to my channel by pressing the bell icon and like and share this video if it resonated with you. So speaking about narcissists is always a loaded topic, right? I have dated someone with very high narcissistic traits who was definitely a toxic individual. I don't know if they were necessarily, pathologically on the narcissism spectrum, if they were narcissistic personality disorder, or if they were just in behavior wise, if they were just narcissistic in nature. But definitely the way that they acted was strange and it wasn't healthy. And I think, I dated this person for over a year at first and they seemed fairly healthy. But after about 15 months, they started to act in a different way and it was very confusing. At that point, after you're dating someone for a period of time and things seem great, and then that person starts acting differently, there's a level of cognitive dissonance which occurs when you believe that the person is one thing and then they start becoming something else. There's a disconnect. They are acting one way, but they used to be a different way and they were better before and now they're not. So that is called cognitive dissonance, when there are two opposing ideas that don't fit. And this is what happens when you're dating someone who's narcissistic, cluster B personality disorders, maybe bipolar. There could be a lot of different reasons why someone starts acting differently. And it doesn't always happen after a year. There could be different periods of time. In my situation, it was like 15 months. And then this person started to act very differently than they had before. So as time has gone on, and I believe personally that my ex was a covert narcissist because it was very covert, the way that he was very self-centered and only thought about himself. It was advertised. It wasn't that people would notice that as much. And it was just in all these things that he did that made me think that deep down inside, he did have the psychological trauma that would have caused him to be a covert narcissist. And it all kind of made sense when I really put the pieces together of his low self-esteem and what he had been through as a child. He had been through so much. And it makes sense that he would have fractured himself at a young age in his mind and created the false self. So for those of you who don't know about narcissism, when someone with narcissism is or NPD, the official disorder, when they're younger, there's some sort of trauma which causes them to split from their real true self and make a false self, which then over time becomes the self that they're trying to bolster. It's almost like an ego that they're trying to constantly feed with what people will call supply, or it comes in the form of admiration. It comes in the form of attention. It comes, there's all different ways that different narcissists get supply. My ex actually was not looking necessarily only at other women for supply, but he was actually getting supply and getting boosted from working on his home nonstop. So he would work on renovating his home for like 15 hours a day on the weekends. And then every day after his regular job, he'd work on this home in the evenings. So it was like an obsession basically. But now I realize the reason there was this obsession was he needed to do this to feel normal. Like he had to feed this beast, this supply of his ego and his false self. So I also know that he had prior to that been addicted to going to the gym. He would go to the gym, so much, and it was like excessive. And I wondered why, but now I know why, because he needed to do these things so he could feel okay about himself. And if he didn't do these things, he wasn't going to be feeling okay about himself. So one big thing I noticed in dating this person was that toxic people, no matter what they are, they could be a narcissist or something else, they often don't really want a healthy relationship. They'll tell you that they do. They'll tell you, I do love you. I do want to be with you. I do want things to work out. But they're not willing to actually take the steps that are necessary in making a healthy relationship. So if you would say to them, well, if you just do X, Y, and Z, we can have a healthy relationship. They'll say, oh, okay, yeah, I'll try that. But then they never will, and then you'll kind of go in a circle. And this is a hallmark of a toxic relationship, is that you never get anywhere, right? So I have a few points that I want to talk about. The first point is that this seems strange to us. This seems strange to people who are healthy. So we think everybody must think like us. If I want a healthy relationship and I want love and caring and respect and kindness, then they must want the same thing, right? No, that's something I've found out through this experience, was that not everybody wants that. Because this person that I dated had that in me, and he still wasn't happy. And he still was never going to be happy. No matter what I ever did, would never have made him happy. And I realized that he didn't want to participate in a healthy relationship. He wanted to do his own thing for himself. And, having a healthy reciprocal relationship wasn't really a priority. It just wasn't. And I was thinking, well, he's in the relationship. He wants this to work, but he didn't really. It was a very different mindset. And it took a while to kind of understand this and say like, oh, wow, like this person, despite me saying we just need to do this and do this person's not willing to do those simple things to make this work. So, what am I left with here? I'm really in this relationship by myself. There was a certain moment in time that I realized I was in this relationship by myself. I was the only one making the efforts to really make it work. And he had basically checked out. He was apathetic. He just basically didn't care. But yet he wanted me to stay in the relationship. And every once in a while he would do something like come by, surprise me or something. But it was like just once in a while. So it didn't feel genuine. It felt more like, why is this just like a once in a while thing? It wasn't like he really genuinely wanted things to work. And that's because these toxic people who aren't really committed, they are not genuine. There's a lot of dishonesty that's underlying their behavior. Even when they're not lying overtly, there's just like a dishonesty under there because they're not being truthful. They're not being true. It's like they have motivations that aren't true and pure. Whereas we're looking for honesty, like a bond and a connection, something special, like someone we can trust, someone who has our back, ride or die. These people are looking to skate under at the minimum effort and focus mostly on their own life and getting their own needs met. And they're not really too concerned with your needs. It's like they are like, oh, yeah. They might placate you. But like I said, there's this underlying dishonesty because they're not really on the same page, but they're trying to act like they are. And they also, one thing I noticed was my ex would assign motivations to me for doing things I did that were like the motivations that he would have had, and they were negative things. So he believed me to be doing things due to motivations that I would have never had. That just wasn't who I am. So it was like, how do you even defend yourself against someone who has decided you have motivations you don't even have? You can't. And it was like I could never win with this person. It was a constant battle of trying to prove who I am, what my values are, to defend myself against what they thought why I was doing things, which had nothing to do with me. It was all projection. So one thing that, you'll find out about these people is that they do get very defensive. So any kind of discussion that you want to have that may, be not critical, but be some sort of constructive criticism, or saying like, hey, I love it if you did this and you didn't do that, or hey, like it hurt my feelings when you did this, they're going to turn this around on you and they're going to make it your fault. They're going to blame you. Okay? And they're going to, not only they're going to blame you, they're going to attack you. So you can't, no matter how you give the feedback, it's going to be problematic, because I've actually even given the feedback in this fashion, in a really gentle way, in front of a therapist that was doing couples therapy with us. And I was still crucified after the therapy session because I was, criticizing him. Everything was a criticism, even what wasn't a criticism. Now, somebody who was non-toxic, who was mature, who was emotionally grown, they would be able to say, okay, I feel criticized every time that my girlfriend says anything to me about my behavior. I need to go to therapy or figure out on my own why I feel so criticized all the time, because something must be going on with me that I feel criticized all the time. But instead, someone who's a narcissist doesn't have that level of self-awareness. So they will say, must be you. You're criticizing me. And that's because you're critical and you're never happy. And that's the problem. But meanwhile, the partner might be just, acting very normal and just being vocal about what they like and don't like within the relationship, never thinking that they're actually criticizing per se. So, in my experience, the toxic people, they don't want to take a look at the criticism at all and say maybe they were being overly sensitive to the criticism. Maybe it wasn't their partner. They don't have that level of self-awareness. Again, they're going to turn it around on you, and they're going to make you take the blame. And they might even laundry list all the things wrong with you that you've ever done, because that happened to me too. I remember one time he turned it around, and then he's like listing out all these things that he thought I did that were so bad over the recent past. And I started to cry, and I'm thinking, how did it go from me talking to this guy to tell him I was feeling insecure because he had just broken up with me the month before and I was still feeling insecure? And how did it go from me expressing my feelings to this guy's attacking me, literally attacking me, as if he wanted to tear me to shreds? And he did tear me to shreds emotionally that day. So, there should be a level of conversation. There should be a level of partnership and cooperation in a relationship. And if you can't have that level of like honesty and reciprocity without one partner attacking the other partner, it's not healthy. It's not healthy. They don't actually want to resolve things. So in my situation too, my ex would go off on tangents. So we'd have these conversations where I was trying to explain to him how I felt and why I felt that way. And we would go back and forth on the phone for hours, literally hours. And he still would not understand. And he still would like go off on these tangents where he would start talking about other stuff, or he'd bring up the past and he'd go off, like literally he would just start talking and go off on this path. And after like a few minutes, I would stop him and say, you're missing the point. You're going off on these tangents and I don't even know why, because I'm trying to talk to you about this, not that. So he would just kind of go off and nothing would get resolved. So we would just go round and around in a circle. And, I'd keep trying to explain and he wouldn't understand, and we would just keep, because he didn't want to understand. but he would give these false words of empathy and understanding. So he would say, thank you for sharing, Catherine. Thank you, for sharing that with me and talking about it and things like that. So it seemed like he was caring. It seemed like he wanted to understand, and yet he didn't, because he would just turn right around the next day and he would just not change, and he would not respect me, and he would, say hurtful things. He would disrespect me often and break up with me when he was angry and resolve that. And then he would question why I felt insecure. Well, it kind of makes sense. If you keep breaking up with someone and you're not sure about a future with them, then they're going to feel insecure. That's going to cause them to feel insecure. They weren't insecure to start with, but you have created an environment of insecurity and a lack of safety. And so ultimately, I felt very unsafe with my partner because I was really, really feeling like there was nothing for me to stand on. There was no stability. There was no consistency. Everything was like jello. It was like walking on jello, basically. And they don't want to take accountability. So they will, like I said, they'll blame you for not treating you well. Somehow they're going to turn that around. So toxic people will blame you and for everything. They're never going to take any accountability. We want them to. We want to say, like, maybe they're going to feel remorse. Maybe they're going to finally apologize. Maybe they're going to see the light, but they never see the light because they can't, because they literally don't care enough to look at themselves and recognize the mistakes they've made. In my situation, well, first I had said to him, you're going to have these problems with any girl in the future if you don't fix your issues, Well, maybe I'll want to treat the next girl better. That was like one of the most painful things anyone's ever said to me in my life, because if you really break that down, what he was saying was I was not good enough to be treated well. He didn't feel motivated or compelled to treat me properly and with love and kindness and respect. But maybe he would want to treat the next girl better, as if I wasn't good enough, as if it was my fault that he didn't treat me well. The truth is, he could have chosen to treat me well. That was his choice. It was his choice to devalue me. It was his choice to discard me. It was his choice to do all those things. But instead of him saying, I just don't care about you anymore, he made it as if I wasn't good enough to be treated well. That was like this really backwards, manipulative, searing comment that just like killed me in my heart, because I was like, wow, this person really doesn't love me. They're saying they love me, but nobody who loves you would say, maybe I'll want to treat the next girl better, as if I wasn't worth treating well. So, they're going to, shirk responsibility, shirk accountability in this kind of way. And, they don't have any self-awareness. So they don't see what they're actually doing. They're not ever stopping to sit down and say, what am I doing to that person? And what am I, how will my words affect that person? They just say it because they just don't have, basically have a filter, and they don't even care about what the repercussions are. So if the person is hurt and comes back and says, I'm hurt, they'll come up with another excuse on why it was okay for them to say that. So the other thing is, they keep you running in circles mentally, so you never really understand what's going on. So they'll say one thing, then they'll say the opposite thing. Maybe they'll talk about the future, but then the next week they're saying, I don't want to talk about the future because it's too far away, or I experience a lot of that kind of back and forth, which some people consider that gaslighting. And I do think it is gaslighting. I went through some specific experiences that were flat out contradictions that came out of his mouth. That one week he was saying one thing and the next week it was the opposite. And then the week after that it was back to the first thing. So it's very confusing. And the gaslighting can be very difficult. I think that healthy people, healthy-minded people who are not toxic, they are clear. So if they like say this week, I love you, that stays, right? And they will keep to that. And as long as there's nothing toxic about the other person, they stay steady, they stay consistent. So you're not going to see this like flip-flapping, like, 1 week I love you, the next week I don't know if I want a future with you, the week after that I love you again, the week after that I'm going to dump you because I'm angry. Like, this stuff was, for me, really, really tumultuous, really damaging to my sense of safety in the world and my sense of self. And I think it's a huge indicator of what's not healthy is the inconsistencies and the flip-flapping back and forth about different topics, especially big topics, important topics. And that's another unhealthy thing. Narcissists and toxic people do not want to grow. Again, as I mentioned before, they don't have the self-awareness to realize that they're not grown. So essentially you're dealing with someone who thinks they are grown, but they're not. And, they don't have a growth mindset. So for those of you who know growth mindset, fixed mindset, they have a fixed mindset. The narcissists and toxic people have a fixed mindset. They can't get to a growth mindset because to get to a growth mindset, you do need to be self-aware. You do need to have an ability to step out of yourself, look at yourself and say, okay, this is what's going on in my life and how am I going to change it for the better? That's a growth mindset. Growth mindset is effort and believing that you can change. Fixed mindset is I am who I am and I'm not going to change. And, my situation with my ex, so many times he said to me, basically, I am who I am, I'm not going to change. He essentially was telling me he wasn't going to change. He would also go to therapy, though, supposedly to change, but nothing ever happened because I believe when he went to therapy, he wasn't telling them the truth. He was telling them his own skewed views on what had happened or whatever. In the end, I think he basically skewed everything so that his therapist thought I was the bad person. And I'm not surprised because that would just be typical for the way that he liked to operate. He again, there's no accountability. There's this inability to own what they did. And that always bothered me. I want to date someone who has accountability, who has integrity, who is trustworthy, and who is honest. And there was this level of dishonesty under the surface because, this person was in and out of my life. They were not full of integrity because if they were, they wouldn't have been breaking up with me so many times. And there was just a lack of solidness. And I think healthy people have a solidness to them. In past relationships I've had that have been healthy relationships, I did not feel this lack of safety that I felt in this most recent toxic relationship. I did not feel safe in this relationship. I felt, like I said, it was a feeling of floating and not having any stability underneath me. But in past relationships with healthy individuals, I have felt safe. And I have felt like I can rely on that person and that, if that person said to me, I want a future with you this week, they still wanted a future with me the next week and the week after. They weren't changing their mind all the time. They were being honest about what their intentions were. So the last thing I want to talk about is interdependence. Narcissists especially and other toxic people do not like interdependence. Interdependence is the healthy part of a relationship dependence. So interdependence is I rely on myself, I rely on you, you rely on yourself, you rely on me, and we have a reciprocity where we are able to, depend on each other, but it's not codependency. So it's almost like a mix between somewhere where the middle meets between codependency and independence. It's something in between. It's a healthy dependence on each other. And partners are supposed to have this. So narcissists don't like this because they think that depending on anyone means you're weak. That loving someone and being vulnerable means you're weak. If you're going to approach them from a mindset of, I'm going to depend on you and be vulnerable and love you, they are going to say you're needy. They do not do interdependence. They do independence because they're all about themselves. They have a mindset deep down inside that all they can rely upon is themselves, and that no one else is really going to be trustworthy and is really going to love them. They don't believe that. Deep down inside, they don't believe they're lovable. And so they have to protect themselves. So they will see other people as being bad or needy or wanting too much, even though that person just wants something healthy and normal. So when you want something healthy and normal from a narcissist, they are going to run because they don't want that. They don't want someone to depend on them or love them or be vulnerable or expect the same in return. They don't want to depend on you. They don't want to be vulnerable with you, and they don't want to love you in a real way, a real deep bond and a connection with real attachment, from the depth of your heart and soul. They don't want that. So for them, they're going to pretend they want that, and they're going to say, yeah, I want a relationship. But when it really comes down to it, they can't deliver, and they don't want you to deliver. They want to keep you at arm's length. They don't want to have that kind of bonding because to them, it's not positive. So you'll notice that when you're more loving to the narcissist, when you're more giving, when you're more selfless, when you're more of all those things, they kind of hate you. There's a lot of resentment underneath these people. Underneath the surface of these people, there's a lot of resentment. And especially if you love them, there's a lot of resentment. So these are just some thoughts about how narcissists really don't want to be happy in a healthy and happy relationship. And they don't really, their goal is not like to have a healthy relationship. They don't see it that way. They just see it as like getting by. And like if the partner like fulfills their needs, then they're just happy with that. So it's like, they are not looking for any kind of super connected partnership. It's not, they're on their own in their mind, and they're not going to be, an equal loving partner with you. It's just not something they desire. They just don't have that desire. And they probably don't even know what it would be like to want that because they've never wanted that before because they don't really know what it is. They don't have a concept. They don't have a concept of what it really is because in their mind, like I said, being like loving and being vulnerable is weak. So if you have someone who thinks that, they can't be vulnerable with you because they'll feel like they're being weak. And if you're doing it towards them, they're going to think you're weak and they lose respect for you. So I think that's also somewhat of what happened in my situation. I think he became resentful and lost a lot of respect for me because I loved him so much and I was so devoted. So, this is just my thoughts on this topic. And if you like this video, please hit the like button. And again, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Always remember, it's never too late to be what you might have been. Bye for now.